Welcome to Illustrated Book Reviews. I'm Urban Banshee. I love Halloween. I'm not alone in this, obviously. It's a very popular and profitable holiday. There is a Halloween aesthetic for nearly everyone, from kid-friendly pumpkin patches to, well, the entire horror genre. My favorite leans towards the spoopy, the silly scary. I'm all about the atomically incorrect skeletons. Give me the bone spiders. I start with this to give context to my stance on Halloween and my opinion of today's book. Callie's Rules by Naomi Zucker. The cover says only Callie can save Halloween if she can figure out the rules. Spoilers, but she doesn't. The basic plot is Callie has just started 6th grade and is struggling with what seems to be unwritten rules for life. She has Halloween to look forward to at least, until Mrs. Van Dyne decides Halloween is too scary, and her town effectively bans it and replaces it with Autumn Fest. Callie decides to fight back to keep Halloween. Normally, this is where the saves Halloween part comes in. Not in this book. The adults in Callie's life decide that even if she is right, following the rules is what is really important. That's a big oof for me. Look, there are some rules out there that are important. I'm on the side of safety and OSHA compliance. A lot of regulations are written in blood. But those are not the rules we are talking about. We are specifically talking about rules made up by people who like to be in charge and are just scared of anything different. The kinds of rules that want certain kinds of people to just not exist. The ending theme for this book is, the reason to push back against unfair rules is because it's just important to think for yourself, and life is just dull otherwise. But it's okay for people to make unfair rules because they have good intentions, and they can't stop you from being yourself. I disagree, but I'll dive more into that when it's relevant. Callie is our narrator, and our first impression of her isn't the best. The book starts off with Callie complaining about how much she hates her name. Her full name is Calliope, which, compared to her sisters, she got off easy. I don't have an issue with the main character preferring a nickname. I like my full name, but I go by a nickname too. It's more that how a story starts is important. The opening line doesn't have to be quote-worthy, but how a book opens sets the tone of the entire story. Callie then goes on about how ugly her English teacher is and how much she hates a girl named Valerie. To drive the point home, Callie does anagrams for Valerie: evil, vain, vile, devil, and devil in a raven. The teacher passes out the assigned reading for her class, a book called Lorna Doone. Not at all that excited for the book, Callie skips the preface. She only reads a preface after she has finished a book, and then only if she liked the book. She gets all of 2 sentences in and decides, nope, not gonna read it. Callie frequently has rules that she writes down, or sometimes just thinks. Rules that everyone else seems to already know, like don't ride your bike to middle school, and girls don't eat lunch. I'm getting neurodivergent vibes from Callie with a strong side of anxiety. This isn't intended by the author at all, and it's just my interpretation based on what we get to see of Callie's thought process. It's a combination of missing social cues and overthinking things. Like the bike thing. Callie rode her bike to school, and when she asks where the bike rack is, the girl she asks gives her a weird look, but tells her. Callie then sees that there are no other bikes on the rack. She then decides that it must be an unwritten rule that middle schoolers don't ride their bikes to school. Or, hear me out, it's the first day of school, and a lot of parents will drop off their kids the first day. The weird look when she asked could have been her overthinking it, or the girl was wondering why Callie didn't find that out on orientation. You know, the day you get to walk around the school so you know where everything is? No girls eating lunch? Again, it's literally the first day of school. First day jitters can mess up your appetite. Like I said, the rules thing is throughout the whole book. I never really enjoyed the rules. It's not that they were jarring, they just reiterated things that either the book already made clear or weren't needed. Like one rule is, teachers are just like the popular kids. That's not a rule, that's an opinion at best. Callie walks her best friend Alice home. Alice is happy and chatting away while Callie broods over the fact her friend has changed. Callie doesn't even attempt to engage in conversation. The book tells us a few interesting facts about Alice, like she has decided to start spelling her name with a Y. Sorry, but unless I want to accidentally say Alice every time, you're Alice with an I in the script. According to Callie, Alice has a normal mom, since she owns aprons for every occasion, and at least a dozen just for Christmas. Alice's dad has built a bomb shelter that has enough food and water to last 2 weeks. Book doesn't say if Callie considers this normal. Alice made Callie promise she wouldn't tell anyone about the shelter, otherwise when the terrorists attack, everyone will want in. But she can sneak in, as long as she brings her own food. It's almost sweet. Written a little bit differently, I would call this a realistic moment. It feels like something I would have whispered to my best friend when I was that age. Wait, where's Callie's bike? It's not mentioned along with the walk home. In fact, the bike is never mentioned again. A small thing, but it is just one of many things that exist in a single moment because the plot calls for it, but doesn't exist beyond that. Callie goes into the shed in the backyard of her house. In there, her mom is welding with the youngest child in what the book keeps playfully calling her cage, but it's just a wooden playpen. The mom, named Mary, is an artist and is making a metal sculpture person for Halloween. She calls them weirdos, and they put them out for Halloween every year. She is currently working on number 14. The book tells us Callie is self-conscious about her family and how weird they are. Like how there are 7 kids in her family, and they do Halloween weird. Besides putting out the weirdos, her father grows his own pumpkins, and on Halloween he dresses up and hands out homemade treats. S'mores he calls toasty ghosties. Not to mention her family makes their own costumes instead of buying them from the store. Can I point out that handing out homemade treats is heavily frowned upon? What are you gonna do? Put a loose s'more in your bag? Perhaps you're supposed to eat it right away. Parents will love that, getting chocolate and marshmallow all over your face in costume mid-trick-or-treating. Aren't the s'mores pre-made so you get them cold, or do you make them there? Look, I love the name for them, Toasty Ghosties, but as someone who's been a child and been to events, both as a kid and adult, the logistics on how to make this work sound like a nightmare. That could be the tagline for this book. Callie's rules. It sounded good on paper, but the logistics are a nightmare. We are also told a few more things to hammer in how odd Callie's family is. Like, they eat weird food, like vegetable meatloaf. Weird is a relative term. What I grew up with can be considered weird by others, but it's all I knew. Heck, as an American, peanut butter is a staple in my cupboard. But you ask someone from outside the States, and they will find that weird. Basically, Callie's family is superficially weird, which I will have opinions on shortly. The family is talking about Halloween at the table. The town has a contest where a kid's art is picked, and the kids get to paint shop windows during the school day. And there's a parade where all the kids get to show off their costumes. Callie has the greatest idea for a costume. Since she has so many siblings, they should be a Chinese dragon together. One of her sisters vetoes the plan since some of them are too old for the parade. Upset at this, Callie runs to her room. But not long after, her sister comes in and tells her they agreed to her idea. At school, it is announced that there will be tests for every single grade. If you don't pass, you have to go to summer school. But even more important, the reputation of the school and the town rests on their performance. I do question if the town itself is the one implementing the test since it's not mentioned the real why behind the tests. Callie likes tests, but she knows that it's weird, so she pretends she is also upset. Her class takes a pretest to see where they need to focus on. Callie is just so amazing, you guys. She is so smart. I barely have to read the sentences. I just flick my eyes over them, and right away I spot the errors. I'm finished in only a few minutes. Her teacher notices her not writing, and when Callie tells her she is done, the teacher ends up giving her all the pretests, which, because she is so smart and amazing, she passes all of them. Of course, Callie is self-conscious about being so smart, so she glances around the classroom to see who noticed her. Literally, the entire class is too focused on their pretests. Since the class will be learning what will be on the test, and Callie already knows it all, she gets her Fridays free, which she does think is neat, but she also beats herself up over what a loser she is for being so smart. That afternoon at home, there's a knock on the door. Meet Mrs. Van Dyne, our villain of the story, who is also Valerie's mom. Callie's mom attempts to make a joke to break the ice. I'm Mary Jones. I'm afraid my name sounds like something in a police file. Mrs. Van Dyne recoils in horror. You've been arrested? Mary assures her that she hasn't and to forget about it. They head to the living room to sit down and chat. They don't have any couches or normal chairs. They have a barber chair for the dad and a dozen rocking chairs of various sizes. Mary makes small talk and tells Miss Van Dyne way too much by Callie's opinion, about how she has 7 kids and works as an artist. It finally comes down to what the whole point of Miss Van Dyne's visit is about. She says she has been thinking about Halloween and the safety of the children. Not their physical safety, though she will admit that it is important too. No, she is worried about the safety of their minds. Halloween is un-American and definitely not Christian. Mary pushes back a little, only saying that she doesn't see how costumes would undermine the American way of life. Callie chimes in with how excited she is about doing a Chinese dragon for Halloween. Mrs. Van Dyne is now certain that this proves her point. A Chinese dragon? It's a kind of demon, isn't it? Or some kind of protection, something to keep away evil spirits, I'm not sure, but there's one thing I am sure of. China is a communist country, isn't it? And it was probably their believing in all those godless demons and spirits that left them open to communism. We must keep such ideas away from our children. Mrs. Van Dyne has a petition and wants to change Halloween to Autumnfest and get rid of anything scary or pagan. No ghosts, witches, or vampires. Nothing a kid might be scared of, like clowns. Also, nothing that a kid might mimic that could be dangerous, so no acrobats or lion tamers. She, of course, has a list of approved costumes like George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and Betsy Ross. The book sorta tried to paint Mary as standing up to Miss Van Dyne, but she doesn't really do anything that I would consider standing her ground. She politely says she disagrees and won't sign the petition. Now we can get into what actually bothered me about this book. First, let me say I don't have any issues with how Mrs. Van Dyne the character is written. Do I greatly dislike her? Yes, but I'm supposed to. No, I actually have a bone to pick with Mary Jane, Callie's mom. Mary is what happens when the manic pixie dream girl gets married and has kids. She is quirky on a superficial level and doesn't have to deal with any consequences of her actions. For starters, her name is Mary, but she saddled all her daughters with names like Andromeda, Calliope, and Melpomene. Her sons got normal names because she let her husband name them. None of her daughters go by the name she calls them. They all have nicknames. Nicknames she refuses to use. Her husband is a lawyer, so they aren't struggling financially, but as far as I'm aware as a reader, she doesn't sell any of her artwork, which is fine, it just feels weird. She doesn't call herself a stay-at-home wife, or call her main job being a mother. She defines herself by art that she only puts out once a year. And come on, the weird chairs, it screams, lol, so quirky. Callie's parents are definitely the fake Allie type. The type of people who say they believe LGBT people or minorities deserve full rights, but they don't need to be loud about it or rude. Mary talks about the visit over dinner, and the dad is upset she didn't read the petition, so they have no idea what they are fighting exactly. The eldest son says, oh well, shame we can't be a dragon. I'm surprised the lawyer dad doesn't have anything of value to say. Nothing about how it could set a bad precedent, or any mentions of similar cases. We don't even get to find out what sort of lawyer he is. We do get to find out Miss Van Dyne's husband is the president of the bank that holds everyone's mortgages and loans. So, of course, everyone will be supporting her. That is exactly how it is presented in the book. No further explanations, just that fact. Is the father implying that as a bank president, Mr. Van Dyne holds some power over everyone in town? I don't think that is entirely legal. Isn't that why banks are regulated in a corporation instead of being controlled by a single person? I googled a little, and from what I can find out, a bank president is just a job. And once a bank has issued a loan or mortgage, it can't just revoke it or call a loan in due early. Obviously barring extenuating circumstances, like the loan being given under fraudulent means. I'm a little confused by the implications and the fact that it's never actually addressed. Mary says she is going to fight it. The kids argue about how censoring what costumes they wear is violating their right to free speech. The dad says basically kids don't have full rights, which isn't true. Yes, kids are under control of their parents, and schools do also have control over a lot that happens in their walls, but they still have rights. Costumes also really fall under dress codes, and a store or school can make rules saying no full-face masks or other guidelines. The parents both decide that as a family they need to go to the town meeting. The kids don't have a choice in this. At this point in the story, Callie is showing signs of anxiety, just a general feeling of dread all the time. Part of it is how much she hates Valerie, though Valerie hasn't done anything. If Callie was a real kid and was showing distress over a classmate and said she was being bullied, I would believe her, but this is a book. You can't just say a character is a bully, I need to see it as a reader. Her extreme reactions and emotions regarding Valerie feel unjustified. On page 60, we finally get Valerie doing something Mean Girl-esque. She is telling other girls what Callie's mom was wearing in a derogatory way. This leads us into a flashback to 5th grade. A bunch of the popular girls had silver charm bracelets covered in charms. The girls would all gossip and talk about their charms. Callie wanted to be like them, so she made a point to start talking about charm bracelets around her parents. For her birthday, her parents got the hint and got her a charm bracelet with a single charm on it. A book. Callie is devastated at the lack of interesting charms and never wears it. Sorta fair. I mean, the point of a charm bracelet is to have multiple charms. Her parents don't discuss being able to get more charms in the future since they are expensive, so in Callie's mind, this is all she will ever have. Also a book? Nothing else interesting about your daughter? Not even something about the type of book she likes? That's rough. Alice shows up and tries to talk to Callie, but Callie only pretends to listen. She is too distracted by the fact that Valerie and her two lackeys are staring right at her. Geez, Callie, have you actually listened to anything your friend has told you? Like, at all? In math, one of Valerie's lackeys mocks Callie by asking for help with math, since she is so good at it. Maybe she can even come over to her house. In art, the other girl mocks Callie about how she must be good at art since her mom is an artist. I have to laugh a little, because I know the tropes, I understand the girls are mocking Callie, but it's actually presented in a very straightforward fashion. Everyone is just so mean to Callie, noticing how smart she is. It almost feels like that one scene in Meet the Robinsons. They all hated me. Hi, Callie. Because this is a book, of course Callie is right. And in fact, at lunch, Valerie says she wants to talk to Alice for a moment. There is only one free seat. Upset, Callie dumps her entire food tray into the trash and runs to the bathroom to hide. She sits there in the bathroom and reads Jane Eyre for the second time and thinks about how much she is just like Jane Eyre. Sure, I've never read it, and even as an avid reader all through middle and high school, I never read any of the classics for fun. I'm not saying it's unrealistic, just a little much. Alice sorta apologizes to Callie later, but Callie has already decided Alice is a traitor and just another of Valerie's lackeys now. Callie, you literally haven't given an actual shit about anything Alice talked about this entire book. You might think you are the master of hiding that you aren't listening, but trust me, people can tell. According to Callie, whenever her family goes somewhere, everyone stares at them. She tries to talk her dad into letting all the kids stay home since it's a school night. He says no, since Halloween is for kids, they should be there to fight it. I have a problem with this, but let's get through the meeting first. The whole family walks to the meeting and literally everyone turns and stares at the whole family as they enter. How are the parents unaware of how they look? Or do they enjoy the intention themselves since they get to feel unique? A grand total of 250 certified residents have signed the petition. First, I really don't like the term certified resident. What does that really mean? Later, it will be implied that it refers to adults who can vote, but come on, that absolutely sounds racist. Not that I'm given the impression anyone in town marks their cards as anything other than Caucasian, and definitely no one in town is anything more than a vague Christian. Also, how freaking small is this town? 250 isn't a lot of people. That's a couple wedding parties at most. Mrs. Van Dyne is given the floor. She first reminds everyone who her husband is, then says most of the people there probably know her from her charity work. But she is also a mom, and darn it, Halloween was just different and better when she was a kid, when families ate dinner together and said grace. She came across an article that shocked her to her core. It had the history of Halloween in it. And did you know Halloween has pagan roots? So costumes of witches, skeletons, vampires, and mummies are costumes of Satan worshippers. Two people laugh at that, but when no one else laughs, they go quiet. Miss Van Dyne calls out a few names of people in the audience she knows, saying that they need to protect the children and instill in them good, God-centered American values. Callie's mom stands up to give her opinion. She starts out by saying that Miss Van Dyne is right. They do need to protect their children against inappropriate influences. Halloween isn't one of those things. She then sits down. Another woman says she agrees Satanism is bad, but she wants her kids to have fun. At this, Mrs. Van Dyne is allowed to take the floor again. She says that Autumn Fest will be fun, and the kids will also learn good values. Callie's dad gets up and motions for all his kids to follow him to the mic. He says all 7 of his kids are good. He starts listing them and something about them that proves they are good. When he gets to Callie, she passes out. Callie is unhurt and is allowed to stay home from school for a single day. Besides that, nothing is done. Getting so anxious that you literally pass out is totally normal and shouldn't be treated to make that person's life easier. Suck it up, kid. I'm kidding. Anxiety is no joke and seriously hinders a person's quality of life. But let's focus on the abysmal excuse of a town meeting. This here was the moment I realized this book was going to upset me. Up until now, it could be tension building and we are only seeing things from Callie's perspective. But at the meeting, we get the actual dialogue of the adults, so I can dissect that. It is immediately odd how much leeway Mrs. Van Dyne is given. Not to mention the fact that she name drops her own husband. Is that a threat? But I really want to dive into her opinions. She says Halloween was better when she was a kid. How? Her only evidence is that people used to eat dinner together and pray to her God, implying that this is no longer the case. Something no one disputes. Not even Callie's parents, who we know eat dinner with their kids. The grace and God-centered comments bother me to no end. Let's go ahead and continue to assume that everyone in town is some form of Christian. I've got news for you guys. Christian comes in a myriad of flavors. Pushing this rhetoric on the pulpit of your church might be fine, but people can also leave and join a different church that they feel more aligned with. The problem isn't just pushing Christianity on other people's kids, it's pushing your brand of Christianity that is the problem. Let me be clear here. My issue with this story isn't that Miss Van Dyne is saying or doing any of this. As a character, that feels believable. I've met people like her. It's that no one kicks up a real fuss or pushes back on any of her arguments. Let's take the pagan is Satanism argument. Besides the fact it's not, guess what else has pagan roots? Easter and Christmas. If everything that pagans have touched is now off limits, then I want to see Christmas trees and Easter bunnies banned. Also, mummies aren't pagan. And technically neither are skeletons. Those are just bones that we have, like all the time. Miss Van Dyne is against anything un-American, so yeah, just straight up racist. Another thing no one calls her out on. Also, just because Miss Van Dyne made the petition doesn't mean she gets full reign over the new holiday. She gets to name it, and later we find out she gets to make a committee to determine what is appropriate. That's not typically how petitions work. The last thing before we move on to the rest of the book, I want to talk about Callie's parents. Yes, again, Mary Jones does something you really can't with a person like Miss Van Dyne, and that is giving her the impression that you agree with her. Compromise is not always the answer, despite what adults will tell you when you are a kid. A bully hits you and takes your money. Your solution isn't to compromise and give him half your money when he wants it, because what the bully wants doesn't matter. Miss Van Dyne doesn't genuinely care about the kids or the so-called awful effects of seeing Halloween decorations. You can tell by what she focuses on, not any evidence or even anecdotal stories, just that it's not Christian enough or American enough. Bigotry, not actual concern. So, when Mary Jones agrees with Miss Van Dyne, she's agreeing that bigotry is correct, but Miss Van Dyne is just taking it too far. But she isn't going to put up too much of a fuss about it. It'd be wrong to be impolite after all. But this isn't a family dinner where you don't want to create a fight over a matter of opinion. This is a stranger who is trying to literally control how you raise your kids. The lawyer dad isn't much better. We don't get to hear what his entire argument was going to be since Callie passing out interrupts it. But what we heard was, we don't need to be bigots to have good kids. No logical arguments, no bringing up potential court cases that might be relevant. Now, honestly, this wouldn't be a deal breaker if the story went the route of kids need to save the day, the series of unfortunate events route. Adults can't be trusted, or even adults don't see the real harm in letting this slide, so the kids save Halloween. Maybe the kids followed the rules to the letter, but not the spirit. Malicious compliance route. Or they expose the hypocrisy of Miss Van Dyne. Maybe she has ulterior motives, or is bribing or threatening others. Since such bribes or threats don't mean anything to kids, they can expose her. I suggest this because there are ways to make sure the adults don't just take care of all of this by themselves, and letting the story focus on Callie. Can we also acknowledge that it's a bit messed up that Callie's parents talk a big game about how kids' choices matter, but force all their kids to go to the meeting? Even when one of them obviously didn't want to go. This wouldn't be as bad if they backed up their kids, but both during this meeting and later ones in the story, they kind of just shrug and go, well, that sucks. Back to the story, the newspaper summarizes the meeting, as well as putting in important information like most medical professionals signed the petition and also think that no candy should be given out, just fruit and toothpaste. Also, a random store owner thinks it's a waste of a school day to let kids paint windows, that they should be learning or taking tests. This is where we find out that Miss Van Dyne and her husband will be making the committee that gets to determine what will be allowed in Autumn Fest. Callie's upset at her mom for not doing more or saying anything of value at the meeting. Her mom's response? To goad her daughter by saying if you think you can do better, then you get in front of the mic next time. Callie takes the bait and immediately regrets it. I mean, she literally passed out from stress when she was mentioned at the meeting. She doesn't bother telling her mom she doesn't actually want to. Why can't she back out? Because her parents won't allow their kids to back out of something once they commit to it. What a wonderful lesson to teach your kids. Once you say yes to something, you are never allowed to say no. Get more information about something later on that changes your stance. Realize you don't actually want to do that thing anymore. Get goaded into it by others. Too bad. You can't revoke consent after you say yes once. That's basically lying. Please know I'm being sarcastic, and this is actually an awful lesson to teach your kids. At school, Callie is attempting to write a speech. This catches the attention of a boy named Sean. She ends up inviting him over to her house accidentally. Turns out he knows about her house because it's the one with the cool metal people every Halloween. They end up making a petition for the kids. with the idea that if they get more signatures than Miss Van Dyne had, they win. The kids at school are unaware of Autumn Fest, which strikes me as odd. This is something that kids would absolutely be talking about. Valerie mocks her petition, saying it's pathetic, and tells her none of the popular kids are going to sign it. Sorry, but I call BS. This is the exact kind of thing that would get Valerie ridiculed. Maybe if Valerie was making the claim that Halloween is for babies and they had outgrown it, I could see kids siding with her. But the story wants me to believe that by virtue of being popular, kids will be willing to give up Halloween for Valerie. Also, teens love Halloween too. Maybe for different reasons. They might be leaning more into the horror aspect of it. So, no matter how much sway an 11-year-old thinks she has, when it comes to teenagers, it means nothing. Alice signs a petition at first, but by lunch Valerie has gotten to her and she wants to remove her signature. Other kids are signing it, but then the principal finds out about it. He takes the petition away and tears it up, saying it defies authority. A petition is literally a tool of democracy. I can't with the adults in this town. Again, if the story did something with this scene, maybe have Callie's lawyer dad chew him out, I wouldn't be quite as upset. You can't even argue that it's a story where all the adults are either incompetent or the bad guys so the kids can rise up. A kids rule, adults drool type of story only works if you have the kids rule part. But you can't argue that it's supposed to be realistic because some adults do act like that, when so much of the plot hinders on you accepting that it's fiction, that it only works this way so it can be Callie's story and no one else's. Callie's teacher is super impressed that she's reading Jane Eyre and assigns her an extra assignment. She wants her to write something original. Next Monday, there's a test on Lorna Doone. Callie is genuinely surprised that she was expected to read the assigned reading. The teacher had been discussing the book prior to the test so that the students would understand what they were reading. When this happened, though, I have no idea since Callie is completely unaware of anything regarding the book Lorna Doone. Since she is so smart, though, she just uses her knowledge of Jane Eyre to answer the questions on the test. The test is asking about how schools in Lorna Doone are different from modern schools, and since Jane Eyre is also an old book, she thinks it'll work out. In fact, she thinks she did an amazing job. By the next town meeting, Callie was able to get 257 signatures on her petition, which only goes to further cement that the amount that Miss Van Dyne had wasn't all that impressive. Callie raises her hand to speak, but the chairman says only legal residents may speak at these meetings. So her dad says he would like to speak on her behalf. He would like to put forth an opposing petition. Turns out that since none of the signatures are from legal residents, it doesn't count. Why her dad didn't warn her ahead of time, I don't know. Also, even if they are all from kids, doesn't it matter at least a little how many kids are opposed to Autumn Fest? The lawyer has nothing to add? The chairman calls Mr. Van Dyne to the floor. He is obviously playing favorites. We all know what a busy man you are, and we are most grateful that you so kindly took on this responsibility. What is that? In a different book, this would be a lead that the chairman and Mr. Van Dyne are in cahoots, and the kids could uncover the behind-the-scenes deal they made. Mr. Van Dyne talks about how what the Druids wore when they did human sacrifices is what kids now wear as witch costumes. Sir? Have you ever seen a Halloween costume before? He also goes on about where Halloween traditions come from beliefs from the past, like putting out food to appease the dead, and jack-o'-lanterns are to scare away evil spirits. So basically, the entirety of Halloween is just straight-up Satanism. If something having pagan roots makes it evil, guess we should outlaw birthdays and wearing your wedding ring on your ring finger. See, it sounds silly when you keep going. That's not all the council has to say, though. A child psychologist takes the floor. He says that even though it may seem like ancient history, there is an increase in vandalism and destruction on Halloween all across the country. Ever hear that correlation doesn't equal causation? When ice cream sales go up, so do shark attacks. The psychologist also says that little kids who can barely talk but they can say trick or treat are learning extortion. Yeah, I'm not taking anything this guy says seriously after that one. The floor is open up for comments and adults take turns agreeing or disagreeing. One parent says fairy tales are scary too, should we ban them? The next parent says yes, they ban fairy tales from their home and they think the library shouldn't even have them either. See, that right there is the whole problem with this discussion. Allowing other people to police Halloween since it's too scary opens up the discussion and possibility of them outlawing anything else they feel isn't American enough or family friendly. They are literally trying to get rid of other cultures. Mrs. Van Dyne already admitted as much with the Chinese dragon thing. It's made official. The council declares no more Halloween. Since they made up Autumn Fest, there won't be any bad or scary stuff associated with it. There will still be a costume parade, but the costumes will need to be appropriate. They can't force kids to forego trick-or-treating, but they say they need to say Happy Autumn Fest, and they request the adults to not hand out candy. They also can't stop the stores from painting their windows for the holiday since it is still a free country, but kids won't get a day off to do it. Mr. Van Dyne is allowed to make a final statement. Here in our town of Hillcrest, we are about to offer our children a new holiday, a wholesome way to observe the season, and one that will give us all adults and children alike an opportunity to celebrate our American way of life. Callie feels awful and wishes she hadn't even tried. She thinks everyone will blame her for the petition not working when she promised it would, which again suggests that the kids won't be happy with this decision. Do we see anything that suggests this? Nope. Valerie isn't shunned. None of the other kids in town throw a fit or a tantrum of any kind. No kids boycott Autumn Fest either. As far as this book is concerned, Callie is the only real thinking person in the world. Or at least town. Callie is deliberately late to school so she won't have to tell anyone the petition didn't work. Turns out there was an assembly that morning so everyone is in the auditorium. The principal is going to show the school a film. An extremely important film, a film that has the potential to save your lives. He goes on to talk about terrorism, 9/11, and how the terrorists will attack again. Were we still having assemblies about terrorism in school in 2009? No matter, back to the book. Callie finds Alice and mentions to her how she must be glad her dad built their family a shelter. Alice tells Callie she doesn't want to be friends anymore. Callie is just too weird. She reads lame books like Jane Eyre. She did a petition, and sometimes in class her lips will start moving like she's talking to herself. She says that's crazy people stuff. What's funny is that there are reasons that Alice could give that wouldn't be too out of left field. Reading only classic books, you might be seen as you trying way too hard to be smart or interesting. Callie only reads one book though, so yeah, that is a little weird. But Callie has been obviously ignoring Alice. If Alice asked her any follow-up questions about anything she had been talking about, Callie would be screwed. But whatever, so what was the extremely important film about? Oh, screw me for caring. The scene is over? Right. Back in class, it turns out that Callie got a big fat F on her test, with a note to see the teacher after school. Turns out Callie wasn't fooling anyone. Her answers about Jane Eyre showed she hadn't read the correct book. The teacher goes on about how it's good that Callie questions authority, but sometimes she shouldn't question authority. The teacher doesn't make an effort to explain the differences though, so it just seems like someone say you should until you shouldn't. Callie asks if there's anything she can do to reverse the F. Her teacher says she is sorry, but she can't do anything. It's important that Callie have consequences for her actions, and besides, it wouldn't be fair to the other students if she treated Callie differently. Now, how's her extra assignment that she only assigned to her going? Callie keeps the F a secret from her parents, and it is never mentioned again. At home, her mom has a pamphlet about what is allowed for Autumn Fest. Upset, Callie asks her mom if she ever minds being different. Her mom says she used to try and be like everyone else when she was Callie's age, but it just never worked. Callie asks if she will be miserable and friendless forever. Her mom's advice is to be yourself and find people who like you for you. So basically, if you want friends, then find people who want to be your friend. This isn't the story of a kid pretending to be something they are not, so none of their friends like the real them. Callie is just being shunned for being weird, and her mom is just saying if people aren't your friend, then they aren't really your friend. Yeah, no shit, bullies aren't really your friends. Thanks, Mom. Over dinner, they discuss a pamphlet and what is allowed. The twins already wanted to be a cow anyway, so they aren't upset. Little Polly wants to be a witch. Mom says it's fine since she won't be in the parade anyway. Wait, this is literally what I was talking about earlier when I mentioned malicious compliance as an option. Boycott the parade if that is the only reason Miss Van Dyne is able to police everyone's costumes. But it's not even suggested as an option. It's just treated like a little cute moment where Callie thinks to herself that her family's weird, but she kinda likes it that way. Callie avoids Sean at school, not wanting to be labeled as boyfriend and girlfriend, because only popular girls are allowed boyfriends. Again, the weirdest takeaway from possibly being teased. At home, her dad reads the newspaper and there's an article stating the council voted to ban all fixed structures. So we are just ramping up with the absurdity. 1. This voting happened awfully fast, with a daily fine of $50 to boot. 2. What exactly is a fixed structure? In story, it just means they can't put their weirdos out for Halloween. In reality, I think they just banned satellite dishes and pink flamingos. Not to mention, everyone else is going to be so pissed when they receive fines for those Christmas decorations come December. This is the sort of nonsense you have to deal with if you have an overzealous HOA. I don't think an entire town can ban this sort of thing. The closest you would get is messing with some zoning laws, but those are often regulations for permanent structures, like fences or a shed. What I'm really saying is the council has wildly overstepped their bounds, and there would be a hell of a lot of backlash. Not from the kids, from the adults. Again, I would accept this if the story embraced the fiction and drama and allowed the kids of this town to save Halloween. but this book is weirdly attached to keeping certain things realistic, like how a single kid wouldn't be able to do anything, while not acknowledging the very situation itself isn't realistic. Callie fumes all through the night and through most of school, until she has a sudden epiphany after hearing the word movement. She is so excited at her idea that she absolutely has to tell someone. At lunch, she breaks several rules to talk to Sean at lunch. She invites him over to dinner. Over dinner, she is trying to tell everyone her idea, but she keeps getting interrupted. When she finally gets her idea all the way out, everyone is on board. Her idea is basically having a statue that moves, pulled by Sean's bike, and they do a play featuring it. The play is scheduled for November 1st. Callie wakes up in a cold sweat over the fact she crossed over to the boys' side at lunch and talked to Sean. She has an inner monologue about rules and how wearing happy costumes won't protect kids from the things that will actually hurt them. What sort of things that might be is never really established. I know this is a kid's book, but this would be a perfect point to address the differences between what Miss Van Dyne thinks protecting kids is versus what is actually useful. Like, bullying is a serious problem, and dressing up as George Washington isn't going to protect kids. Call Miss Van Dyne out on her hypocrisy over her daughter actually causing harm by being a bully. Don't dance around the issue. Autumn Fest finally arrives. Little Polly is dressed up as a witch, and Miss Van Dyne gets super upset, but Callie's mom just says since she isn't in the parade, it's fine. It's here that Callie realizes that Miss Van Dyne is just like her. She just gets scared when things aren't perfect. Not to get too dark, but this is the kind of thing that allows parents to abuse their kids. They mean well. They just want their kids to be perfect. What they think is perfect. It's okay that they hit their son for playing with dolls. What if he grows up gay and then goes to hell? Maybe Miss Van Dyne truly means well and is legitimately worried about the souls of the kids in town. Doesn't matter. The phrase hell is paved with good intentions is perfect here. Actions matter. Consequences matter. Yes, to a certain extent, it does matter if you intended harm or not, but you can't unshatter a plate. Whether you broke it in anger or by accident, it's still broken. It's not enough to mean well. You have to do well. Miss Van Dyne is arranging all the kids in a way she thinks is aesthetically pleasing. A kid in a scarecrow costume runs to his mom crying because the twins in their cow costume pretended to eat some of his straw. Miss Van Dyne kicks them out of the parade because she's just in charge of basically everything. She even gets a megaphone that she gives to Valerie so she can be the leader of the parade. Callie and her siblings go, not trick-or-treating, and get the lamest haul known to kid kind. Only 3 pieces of candy, lots of apples, some raisins, toothbrushes, and pencils. Oh, this town would have a literal riot if this really happened. Have you met a child that was told no to candy? Well, this is fucking bullshit. What do you propose we do? The next day is the day of the play. It's performed on their front yard. The gist of the play is, there were some villagers and something unspeakable happened, so they all ran away and started living in a cave in the dark. Years later, a dragon shows up at the cave and every villager was terrified except a single girl who thinks the dragon is pretty, so she decides to follow it. They tell the girl the outside world is scary, but she leaves and is never seen again. The audience is then instructed to follow the girl and the dragon. The audience rushes to the backyard where the weirdos are set up and the dragon is. They cheer for Callie. At school, lots of kids are talking about how cool her play was. Alice comes up to Callie, but Callie is dismissive at first. Alice does apologize, but only for calling Callie mean in that very conversation. I guess they're friends again, though Alice is wondering if Callie could explain the play because she didn't understand it. The play wasn't exactly subtle, but I guess stay in school, Alice. Callie's dad receives a fine a week later for $50 for having a fixture on the lawn. They go to the town council meeting to contest it. Callie is able to convince the chairman to let her talk. She says the dragon wasn't affixed to anything and moved, so it was wrong to find them. Callie says she has plenty of witnesses if she needs. At this, her mom tries to shut her down. The chairman says fine, but he will see about fixing this loophole, and the display their family set out to create was in poor taste. Callie tries to argue about this, but her parents literally drag her out of the meeting. The next morning, Callie's parents gift her 2 more charms for her bracelet as an early birthday present, a dragon and a heart. Her mom says the heart is because of the courage she showed, but she really does need to be more polite and not speak when she is angry. Callie wears the bracelet to school. The end. Technically, the book is not offensive. It just hit a few too many of my own personal pet peeves. I get what the book was going for. As a kid, sometimes adults make rules that don't make sense, and it's important to voice your concerns, but it's also important to go about things the right way. If I read it as a kid, I might be a bit miffed at the ending, but it wouldn't linger in my mind. As an adult, I see the story not as a happy ending, but as a failing of the adults in Callie's life. The council made it clear that it wasn't interested in listening to kids, and practically made it a rule that only legal voters had a voice. Okay, where were their voices? Callie's mom tries to make it her daughter's responsibility to speak up during the meeting, but when Callie tries, her mom and dad not only don't back her up, but literally drag her out of the meeting when she's trying to make her voice heard. Also, besides the fact the $50 fine was BS, it wasn't even a moving statue. It was basically a costume. Who reported it? How did they verify that the report was valid? Could another adult in town make false reports about their neighbors? Also, a fine for the dragon being on the lawn for all of 30 minutes? But honestly, I would be willing to forgive all the little weird issues I had with this book and never mention it to anyone if it wasn't for the moral the story presents. That people like Ms. Van Dyne mean well, and it's more important to be polite than to call out what is unjust. I'm sorry, but I fundamentally disagree. Until next time, I'm Urban Banshee, and go support your local library.